You just had the news from Washington. So the valedictorian out at USC was supposed to give a speech, and it was canceled, right? They called it off, and they said they couldn't keep her safe, essentially. There's been others that said, you know, she's made anti-Semitic comments in the past or liked these social media posts that were anti-Semitic. But at the end of the day, they said they can't keep this valedictorian speech safe. Your reaction to it?
Sure. Number one, she certainly did not make anti-Semitic comments, and conflating criticism of the state of Israel, conflating talking about human rights for all, Palestinians, Israelis, Muslims, Jews, Christians, is not equivalent to anti-Semitism. So that is an important correction needed. But back to the decision by the university, it is certainly dishonest and cowardly for them to be hiding behind the pretext or the excuse of security, because by doing so, number one, although they themselves have not shared any real threats that they've received, they didn't have anything that they could point to. But more importantly, this is a university that is so used to hosting commencements for 65,000 people. That's a city. They're used to protecting speakers who oftentimes are somehow always controversial or to a segment of the population. So they're used to having necessary security. So by canceling her speech, it is sending a message that certain free speech is allowed, and anything that is of criticism of Israel is not allowed.
Right.
It sent a message that it is not there to protect its students.
Let me play what she said about this, which is interesting as well, because she said she didn't get she didn't know why they were canceled, essentially. Her name is Asna, and she was interviewed by CBS. I just want to play a clip of what she said. We'll come back and ask you about it. Here it is.
Sure.
I was never given the evidence that any safety concerns and that any security concerns were founded. I'm not apologizing for the link that I put in my Instagram. What I am saying is that I'm committed to human rights. I'm committed to the human rights for all people.
So she didn't apologize for the statements we discussed earlier, but she says in terms of security, she didn't know anything about it. They never told her why. So.
No, they didn't. They used that as a pretext. But as I said, this is disingenuous, because basically what they're admitting to, it's caving in to threats by bullies, by people who are undermining or threatening the safety of students, supposedly. And they could have easily addressed that. And the reality is they're rewarding bigotry and bullying at the expense of the rights of their students. Someone who worked so hard to accomplish this distinct honor, being the valedictorian of her school,
right.
A pretty prominent school. So for her to reach that level, the school should be celebrating that success, and especially celebrating someone who cares about human rights, including those of the Palestinian people.
Let me ask you just give you a chance to respond to the other side of this, which was put forward by this group. They're called Trojans of Israel. We could put their statement up. They talked about her social media statements that she alluded to there in the link on the page, which apparently it called Zionism a racist settler colonial ideology, and she advocated for the abolishment of Israel, but they say it's rhetoric that denies the right of the Jewish people to self-determination or calls for the destruction of the only Jewish state. That must be denounced as anti-Semitic bigotry. How do you respond to that?
Well, she certainly does not hide the fact that she calls for the dismantling of the apartheid and racist structure that exists in Israel, and rebuilding a state in which there's coexistence. There are equal rights for all people. I mean, I have some news to those who, Trojans for Israel. This is how the majority of people in the world feel. This is how the majority of people in America feel. This is how a substantial segment of the Israeli population, Jewish population, feels. We can't forever continue to defend the apartheid system and structure. If we're going to ban every speaker who calls for the dismantling of the apartheid system, which has been described as apartheid by every human rights organization in the world, including Israeli one, then we won't have any speaker anymore.
We're going to have to leave it there. There's a lot we could go back and forth on this, but the bottom line, the speech has been canceled, whether it's safety or whether it's political views. The speech has been canceled. We thank you for coming out and sharing your views on it. We'll continue to cover it. The reason we have to go is we're keeping an eye on what's happening in Washington. Again, as we said a moment ago, the